Good morning, Life Class. We are here in our room in Nashville, Tennessee, coming to you live April 27th, 2025, with a much requested topic this morning. We're going to be talking about the fear of abandonment. And before we start, let us start with our ritual of our 3, 4, 5 breaths this morning. So no matter where you may be, in your office, in your bed, on the beach, here in our classroom with us this morning, try to relax as much as you can in your chair, feeling your feet solidly on the floor, your body, your back against the chair. Let's start by taking a good deep breath in. Inhale. Feel your breath go all the way down. Exhale very deeply. And we are going to be doing a series of inhaling to the count of 3, holding that breath to the count of 4, and exhaling to the count of 5. Here we go with the first one. Second breath, inhale 3, hold for 4, out for 5. Third breath in. Let's do one more. In for 3, inhale through the nose. Hold for 4 counts. Exhale very slowly for a count of 5. Drop your shoulders. Feel yourself heavy, almost as though melting into your chair and into the floor. Now, when you're ready, you may open your eyes, slowly come back. This is something I hope that you will be able to easily remember and to repeat anytime you feel that little flutter of anxiety or muscle twitching or beginning to feel that heaviness in your chest. This is something that will very quickly get that oxygen to your brain. I think that in terms of an existential fear, I think in terms of believing in something greater than ourselves, that there really is a creator, being, or the power of love, or whatever you might want to call it, whether you're a religious person or spiritual person or even not, or whether you're searching, we can all agree that this fear of abandonment is probably one of the ones that we all have to come and face as human beings. And as I have introduced on prior videos, that I have had the incredible blessing and fortune and opportunity to train with Tim Fletcher and his Lift React program and teach this material over this last years. I'm going to try to do my best to teach the material that I have read with him and also sort of work in some of my own. But Tim says something I would really agree with. And after working with people professionally for close to 50 years, I would agree with what he says. And it's this: next to shame, the fear of abandonment is one of the most devastating aspects of complex trauma. And most people do not even realize the devastating effect it's had on their life, how they look at themselves, how they approach relationships, how much it sucks out of their lives, how much it's deprived them. and how much negative material this gives us to weave stories about. How we come up with the stuff in our heads and project onto other people. And that's what we want to develop today. There are so many people you may know that might even be your friends that may walk around and have a facade of being just totally well-adjusted and happy. But if you were to really have a deep conversation with them or live with them 24/7, you would find that our topic today is the thing that really deprives them of the joy and the peace that they could have in this life. And so much of it's completely subconscious, but it does affect their relationships negatively. So I'm going to do my best to do Tim justice and explain kind of how complex trauma results in this fear of abandonment. And then we'll just look at ourselves. So classmates and listeners, just try to have kind of a inner observing eye at some of your own behaviors, or perhaps if you've done a lot of work on this already, look at your progress from where you used to be, perhaps as a young person. Complex trauma is not entirely the result of living in a dangerous environment. But what it is living in a dangerous environment. And I don't mean just physically, but emotionally dangerous environment where you don't feel safe, with no one to help you. So you as a child felt like you were facing this danger all alone. So ones that were supposed to be there for you, that's teachers, parents, caregivers, babysitters, pastors, people in authority, they just weren't there for you emotionally, physically, perhaps spiritually. So as a child, you felt abandoned. And you might have had those people definitely there physically for you, putting food on the table, making sure you had clothes or got to school. But you just did not have that feeling that they got you, that they actively were there to care for you and protect you when bad things happened. And so it was that feeling of being all alone. I'll give you a quote from Tim Fletcher that I loved, that I love this quote, who spent many decades as a pastoral counselor in the prison system. He says, "I think after my years of working in this field that the feeling of abandonment is probably one of the deepest emotional pains that a person can experience. There's not much more of a painful emotion than abandonment." And I would definitely agree with that. Nothing says more loudly to a child that they don't matter than when they are abandoned emotionally or physically. And it basically just says simply to a child, the child's mind, you are not lovable. You are not valuable. So this is why nothing communicates the shame message louder than abandonment. And complex trauma, as we have said in previous lessons, is basically about children feeling abandoned. So what happens with that is that inside a child says, "This feels so bad that I never ever want to experience it again." And so they develop a fear of being abandoned again. Now, stay with me on this because this can get kind of tricky. I want to describe what is sort of an internal contradiction. And people really are walking contradictions, aren't they? You know, when you ask somebody, how can someone be this way and then be that way? And someone may tell you, oh, well, we're all kind of like that if you look at it. So a person with a fear of abandonment can fear abandonment, and they work so hard to fear being abandoned again. But they're yet convinced at a core level that everybody who gets to know them will abandon them. Okay? So they work really hard not to be abandoned, but they're convinced they will be abandoned. Got that part? All right. So this is what makes it such a devastating thing. it shapes what you believe about yourself in relationships and other people. So what we want to look at today is that perhaps part of our psyche, perhaps part of our belief system, has contained that. And it could be that even in small ways it's doing some damage to our relationships. And it could be that perhaps your life could be improved if it's affecting you now. And the wonderful thing about this material, this information, is that we can begin working at changing it now. Adding one more thing, children who feel abandoned by their parents or authority figures may have become convinced that they're not lovable. They may have become convinced that they're a terrible mistake. And later on, they may abandon themselves. They may begin to not even want to connect with themselves. They may decide they don't want a relationship with themselves. Living in their skin, living in their own skin, is something that they may decide they do not want to do. All because they have had to abandon themselves. It's just too painful to live with themselves. And I know what that feels like. I'm not going to tell my own story at this point, but that was the decision that I made when I became an alcoholic later in life. I could no longer live in my own skin, and so I made the decision to abandon myself. So I began to feel very much like even when I was with a lot of people or in the middle of a crowd, I felt completely alone because my relationship with myself had been split. So if we look at the question, do you or do I have the fear of abandonment inside me at a conscious or subconscious level? This is an amazing talk out in front of us because Tim Fletcher, with his scientific and psychological research, has taken really the best of what has been written and has laid out 36 different characteristics. And that's a lot of them. But it's really interesting to listen to these, and you don't have to go, all compulsive and write all these down or even count up how many, but just relaxing, giving sort of a mental nod, let's say, when it comes to several of these that you may have. I know that in going over this, and as I get deeper into it, I will add more to mine, some of which with therapy I've overcome through the years, but many will still be kind of down in there. And the idea is to just feel validated in terms of your own history that, yes, I belong. There's a reason I have these feelings. And then, of course, the hope is in healing this. There is great healing to be had. You will not continue to feel this way. There's a reason that you feel this way. So please look at this in a healing, loving, and positive light. Number one that I'd like to put out there, the first characteristic of a person with a fear of abandonment is often when they meet somebody they like, instead of gradually getting to know them, there's just this urge to attach way too quickly. And what that is basically saying, I don't want to go through the time of getting to know a person in a healthy way, because if I do, I might risk losing them. So let's attach really, really quickly with great intensity, and that will increase my chances that they won't abandon me. So it's a time thing, it's an impatience thing. Like if I glom onto you like really, really fast, okay, this is going to increase my chances and I won't lose you. That's basically what it feels like. Secondly, You may move out of a relationship too quickly, or its opposite. Thirdly, you may stay in an unhealthy relationship way too long. So in the first one, some people with fear of abandonment issues, they go about relationships this way. And I see this a lot. One strike, you're out. I'm not giving you a second chance. I'm not going to try to work it out and resolve it with you. You hurt me. You're out of my life. I'm never giving you another opportunity to hurt me. Okay, so that's one extreme. Here's the other extreme. I am so afraid of being abandoned, so I am going to, and I just said this with a client yesterday, I'm going to dive under the table and accept little crumbs of love, whatever you happen to toss off. And I'll stay in a very unhealthy, even an abusive relationship because I so do not want to be alone, because that would mean abandonment. And so we stay in a relationship too long. Here's the next one. We're reluctant to fully invest in a relationship, so we always need a quote-unquote escape hatch. We may be always shying away from a full commitment to a relationship because, after all, they're probably going to abandon me eventually. So I don't want to fully commit or invest in a relationship. We hold back. And that leads to the next one I'm going to describe, where we avoid emotional intimacy. And this is where it says, if a person gets to know me well, we're convinced that they will leave us. They'll abandon us. So often people will try to just have lots and lots of fun, superficial intimacy. But if we avoid deep, real intimacy is avoided for fear they will abandon us. And if we keep walls around our heart and we keep our mask on, we don't let the other person see the real us. We've talked a lot about shame in this class. The loudest message that comes out of abandonment is what? You're not good enough, right? So the child takes that so personally. So shame is huge for people who have experienced the feeling of being abandoned because they don't feel that they're lovable or valuable. And that leads us to the next one. Therefore, they don't feel they're worthy of love. And when that happens, we feel like we have to earn love because we're not worthy just the way we are. That leads to many insecurities. Well, if my family likes my appearance, then we constantly hyperscan ourselves. Am I too fat? Am I too thin? All of these things. Because if you don't find me perfect to you, you will abandon me. So now we could become insecure about our personality, our weight, our body, how we talk, just all different kinds of things. You know, if you really interview a person who's working on this, you'll find all kinds of things that were particularly subjective to the parent or the caregiver. I know we were scanned for our shoulders, our posture, our diction, you know, all kinds of things. Where in another family, that would not even be noticed, but it might be, you know, it might be something else. You know, it might be a spot on a dress, or it might be, you know, anything else that was the parent was particular about. This can culminate in struggling to trust people because everyone that we've trusted as a child might have let us down, may have abandoned us. So sometimes there's issues in adulthood with trust. Jealousy is interesting. Sometimes with people with abandonment will really demonstrate a lot of jealousy if their friend or partner makes another close friendship, or let's say they're talking to someone immediately, because they're just afraid. It's the fear that comes up that the other person's going to value someone else more than you and is going to abandon you. So jealousy is usually a huge issue. And this is just simply because the visualization comes into the mind of the loved one, comes into the head of that person. And you just visualize automatically the other person leaving, because abandonment has happened before and it feels like it's happening right now. Almost like you're watching it happen as a prediction in your mind. And then here's another one that comes up too. Let's say that the partner or loved one is away for a couple of days on a business trip. There can be with some people who were abandoned as children, and I mean emotionally abandoned. And I have a couple of people I work with that experience this severely. There's just an instant plunge or depression. The feeling is as though they've been left forever. Separation anxiety, separation blues. And then another one is someone does something to you, there's an overanalyzation. It starts like this. What was their motive? Why did they do that? Well, did they mean this? Well, did they mean that? And there's just a hyper examination of every single thing that would have happened within that interaction. And that will have at its core the fear of, am I going to be abandoned? So there's a hypersensitivity to anything that can be perceived as criticism, as disrespect, something that somebody says to me by way of advice or a way of trying to help me improve, or something that wasn't right or could have been done better. If I am coming from my trigger fear of abandonment, I'm most likely to say, oh, they don't like me anymore, they're going to abandon me. And quite possibly that will hook repressed anger. So if a person has not been able to express their anger, and that's stored down here in the gut, it could be a lot of really good and righteous anger they've never been able to get in touch with before. And that's a good thing, but it's big time. And so if their fear of abandonment gets triggered today, it's just one big explosion. So if you encounter that with someone, know where that comes from. Know where that comes from. It's just simply delayed. So if you know where those explosions come from, then you can love that person in it and be gentle with them. Also, when control comes up with a person who has never gotten to deal with this fear before, all they're thinking is, if I try to control you, you won't leave me. So I'll control who you see, maybe what activities that you become involved in. I just want to avoid being abandoned. Now, what's so interesting is that often those of us who really fear being abandoned is that we might pick emotionally unavailable people to get into a close relationship with in our early years. We may pick people who feel safe because they're not going to pry. They're not going to dig. But yet they're just not able to connect. So it sets it up that they're eventually going to abandon us. If the relationship starts to go really well, fear surfaces, and then they go, oh, something bad is about to happen. This is just too good to be true. And then there is a sabotaging of a good relationship. Because of the fear that I don't want to get my hopes up, because I know they're going to abandon me eventually, then if the relationship does break up, they just tend to blame themselves. And they tend to say it's mainly my fault as to why it broke up. And here's the next one. when they meet somebody that is a potential partner, they study them carefully and can look for flaws because they want to spot any flaw because that increases the probability that the person will abandon them. So I hear this a lot about from older parents who are just, waiting on that 40 or 50-year-old, adult child that continues to find the flaw with every single partner. Are they ever going to marry? Are they ever going to find someone, and they look back at their own background. Oh, was it my divorce that caused this? Was it, period of time I had to be away on business, and no, not necessarily, but here's some information that might help. So, with any of us, if we have been through this personally, we may have not been trying to look at someone accurately or even to look at their positive qualities. We may have just been microscopically honed in on flaws or weaknesses, and we may have been doing this to ourselves to set a relationship on the road to trouble. Here's another one. We can tend to copy other people's personalities. So if you just see somebody that everybody seems to like and want to be a friend with, before we're really sort of fully formed and we just feel so insecure with this when we're so afraid, we can think, well, if I'm like that person, then that's what will happen to me. Okay, I'll never be abandoned. So I'll copy their personality, and so I'm going to be like them. So they will adopt a mask or what's called a persona, and to please people. And they may be afraid to set boundaries with people also too. One of the things that comes out of fear of abandonment would be the absolute belief that if I set a boundary with you, if I say no to you, you might get mad at me and leave me. And that is a very, very real feeling. And therefore, so I won't set boundaries with you. Or sometimes the person with a fear of abandonment won't deal well with other people setting boundaries with them. So if you say no to me, or if you're calling me too much, I need you to just slow that down. That just, if someone says that, then that will be experienced as a rejection, and this childhood pain will be triggered. And it's very, very, very painful. So, the interaction will be reduced to just some raw pain, and the other person will have no idea what will have happened. So you may think of examples of this in your life with another person. So the person who has an abandonment fear does not like boundaries at all. And they want the other person to absolutely love them, like them to the max all the time. Another thing I want to mention is that often people who suffer with this are willing to give up everything to please you and anything so that they will not be abandoned. So sometimes relationships are set up as inequality, giving more than the other person consistently and letting the other person sort of run the relationship. Also feeling responsible for the other person's emotions. So if the other person is sad or angry, you can panic. You can go, oh, this must mean they're getting ready to leave me. It means they don't like me anymore. And so you might work overtime to try and make them happy, to try and take their anger away so they won't abandon you. Here's the next one. Some people with fear of abandonment always need to be the center of attention. They always want the spotlight on them. They always want to be noticed because they think if everybody's noticing me, then they're going to validate me. And then they're going to want to stay with me. When you're in a relationship, and something happens that you perceive as negative, there's some tension, and there's some conflict, and there's a disagreement, or the partner's a bit sad or stressed out, you might go to a worst case scenario and start to catastrophize and think like this. Oh no, this is all about me. They must be unhappy with me and they are getting ready to abandon me. So we just jump to this worst case scenario. It doesn't really matter what people actually do. You just twist what they say. You just twist their actions, twist their motives to try to set it up. Yeah, they're probably going to abandon me. So, though you fear abandonment, you just expect it so much. You twist everything to support that fear in your mind. See how this raw material from childhood will just work into this illusion, almost this trance, so that you're just so separated from the reality of what's going on. So many people who do this will end a relationship that's perfectly fine because they're in their own delusion, and the other person will just be like, what happened? You know, what happened? The next one, what they use to try to convince themselves the other person isn't going to abandon them, they'll say this: we have intense feelings for each other, so the measure of closeness, the measure of the health of the relationship, the measure of the fact that a person won't abandon me is that we have so much intensity for each other. And we have so many intense positive feelings. And many couples will say sex is often the way we produce that. The sex is just so great. And, you know, they will use that as the reason why they will never be abandoned. A next one is they have a hard time not being in a relationship. So if they're in a relationship, no matter how bad it can be, it proves to them they must be lovable because somebody wants to be with them. If they're not in a relationship, it seems to prove they're not lovable. And the thing they fear, and so they stay in relationships. They will stay in a horrible relationship just so they won't be alone. And some people, if they see a relationship falling apart before it ends, they make sure to go get another secret relationship ready to move into because they are going to have to prove that they're going to be okay, because being alone is the worst thing that they could possibly imagine. So I see this a lot where people have, I call it ships in different harbors. You know, they spend a lot of time in readiness, grooming other potential partners before they let go of this. So making false conclusions about other people's motives that they don't have any proof about and jumping to other conclusions. So let me give you an example. Somebody who's really nice wants to be their friend and wants to spend time with them, but their brain is saying, they don't really love me, they just want to use me. And this is without evidence, of course. They just jump there. Or someone is just giving them very encouraging, positive feedback on a regular basis, validating them. But the brain of the person says, well, they talk nice to my face, but they're just saying that. They're just saying that. They're probably talking badly behind my face. They don't really mean that. How could they mean this nice stuff? Or they might come home one day or go see a friend one day, and the friend is busy doing something, and the friend just says, oh, hey, how you doing? But they don't show the normal sparkle, the normal big excitement that they did a couple of other times. So the person with the fear of abandonment says, oh yeah, they're probably just getting tired of me. They probably don't like me anymore. And they jump to that conclusion. Okay? So Or if a person is saying nice things to them on a regular basis, they go, oh, they just filter out all the negative things that they're really thinking, and they just say positive, but they're really thinking those bad things. And then if you see your friend talking to someone else and laughing with that person, okay, well, they've forgotten all about me. They're planning on starting a relationship with them. So these are just examples, very classic examples of the fear of abandonment that can haunt us in and through adulthood. But the thing to remember with all of these are that these are distorted assumptions that are made in the mind with absolutely no physical evidence. Okay, so when as I spend my weeks going through these things with folks, I will go, okay, what evidence do you have? Okay, with this script going on? How long has had these types of scripts been going on in your mind? The next one is huge. People with a fear of abandonment tend to play a lot of games when they're in relationships. They don't know it, but they do. So one of the things that they'll do is they'll just kind of push the person away. Like they might not be as talkative with them. So, it's kind of a testing period of time. They might not be as warm with a person because they want to see if the other person will chase them in a way. Or a similar thing, they might go incommunicado for a couple of days just to see if things have changed. It's constant texting. Or they want to see if the person answers their text or doesn't answer their text. Is the rhythm changing? They want to see if the period of frequency between visits they measure, it's just a hyper scanning. And it's still that child inside just wanting to know, am I going to be loved? Am I going to be consistently loved? Are you going to be there? You see? It goes back to these 12 basic needs we talked about at the beginning of our course. Just to see how the person responds. Are you gonna love me? Are you gonna come after me if I need you? So what can happen also too, if the person gets increasingly anxious, they really start testing. And they can say, and what will happen with couples sometimes, I know you're planning on leaving me. Start accusing a perfectly innocent partner. And sometimes, too, where they really get in trouble is I'll have a perfectly faithful partner who'll call me and just go, I just don't know what to do with her. I don't know what to do with him. In the middle of the night, they're waking me up, accusing me of cheating on them. I would never, and that that's true. So this fear of abandonment can play out in marriages or partnerships very, very often and cause tremendous problems with a very innocent, faithful partner. And sometimes the partner can try to convince the other that they really are terrible and can even go to the lengths of saying, have you seen so-and-so? Have you seen how handsome he is or how beautiful she is? Well, haven't you ever thought about, taking up with them? These are real things that happen all the time. So can you imagine, and this is a question that Tim Fletcher asked, and that I often have asked in my practice, can you imagine if you're in a relationship with a healthy person, how tiresome that can become? You really have to have infinite patience and have done your own work with this dynamic to not say, okay, I don't need this constant game playing anymore. I believe I'm out of here. If you keep doing this, okay. What we're going to see is that people with a fear of abandonment actually create the very thing they're trying to prevent. They drive people away. They create an environment, people say, eventually, unless they know how to deal with this, they eventually are going to say, okay, I've had enough. I can't ever get any inner peace with this. If you don't trust me, or know who I am by now, I can't get any peace. I can't self-regulate. I can't center. I can't take care of myself with this constant back and forth. So I want to finish up today, and we'll continue on this next week, but I do want to include one more thing, and that would be the next one is very critical. People with abandonment issues often have very unrealistic expectations about relationships. So if you think of a child who's been abandoned, and again, I'm not talking about physically, I'm not talking about left off at the orphanage, I'm talking about not feeling safe. The brain of the child is saying, I never want to be abandoned again. So what do I need to do or look for in other people to guarantee I'll never be abandoned again? Number one, the child says about the person, they must only love me. This is where the jealousy part comes in. They must only love me. If they have affection for anyone else, there's a chance they might abandon me. Okay, so there's no sharing of their special person. And that means they need to give up. In extreme cases, they need to give up all the other relationships. They can't love their family. They can't love their friends. I need to be the special one. Now, we know intellectually that's so realistic, but we also know that that happens in the heart. Secondly, they must never, ever fail. They must be perfect. I've had this expectation very, very often in my counseling practice, to where I'll have to say when we're working on this with a client, I am human. I make mistakes. I will fail. I have been in therapy. I have several supervisors, and I will apologize. But do not expect perfection from me, because it's usually a big blowout, when I disappoint someone. So what's said in the heart and the brain, the one with the fear of abandonment, if they fail me, they may turn out to be not a good person who is going to abandon me, just like all the others. Or if they have a flaw, I'm going to find it, because that's a predictor that they will abandon me. So they must be perfect, is the expectation. They must give me constant validation. They must only say positive things about me. They can never point out any of my flaws. So there's an unrealistic expectation. They must never set boundaries with me. They must let me do whatever I want and never say no to me. So these are some of the things that are operative at first when you begin to work on this. This is, how the beginning of trust really develops. And I think this is just really, really helpful, because we can recognize a lot of this in ourselves. Like, how do we really feel? That we wouldn't tell anybody. But when we realize this is just classic human stuff, it's like, oh, okay. I never would have told anybody that. Well, here it is. This is the basic stuff in course. This is how the human heart is constructed. How the human heart is constructed. And so this is why belonging is so important in classes like this, in groups like this, in connectivity, and to be able to understand why we need the things that we do. So I thank you all for showing up today for this first part of fear of abandonment. We have several more points that we will continue in a part 2 this next week, but may you be blessed, and we will include this in a podcast and put this up on our YouTube channel just as soon as possible. Thank you.